A warm welcome to the show. Today we have a pleasure to speak with a Scottish artist, Philip Colbert, who is known for his bold, hyper-pop art style and an iconic lobster persona. Hello and welcome, delighted to have you with us.
Amazing, great to be here.
So you're often described as the godson of Andy Warhol. How do you feel about that comparison?
Well, I love Warhol, so it's I think it's a fun thing. I'm a lobster as well, though.
Okay, so has he inspired your work in some ways? Who were your inspirations?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Scotland, and I guess from a young age, I was obsessed with art. I loved artists like Van Gogh and later Marcel Duchamp, one of the great sort of conceptual artists, and then more later than that, like the pop movement, including Warhol. So I guess I think of myself very much as like a pop artist, inspired by pop culture. And then, yeah, because I grew up in Scotland in the countryside, I was really obsessed with nature, and lobsters in the seaside were like my equivalent of Walt Disney.
Right, so could you explain this lobster persona to our audiences so that they understand?
Yeah, well, for me, the great power of art is the freedom of art to reinvent the world, and this sort of freedom of our expression as individuals. And for me, like as an artist, I can transform into this cartoon lobster. That is my artistic identity. In art, I am free like that. I can have a conversation I can travel through time. I can talk. I think about art from the history of time to now. You know, it's a membrane of freedom, art, and so art allows me to have this alter ego, this persona of this lobster character, which I love. Is the fact it's a complete representation of my human freedom.
Okay, but why a lobster?
Lobsters are very important creatures. They're almost like aliens from another planet. They encourage humans to behave surreally. The artist Salvador Dali was obsessed with lobsters and made many surrealist artworks, such as the Lobster telephone. And also he put a lobster on a dress with Schiaparelli. So the lobster already became like quite a pop culture symbol of surrealism because of Dali, but also the lobster was very important as a mortality symbol in the Dutch still life period, for example. The lobster on the table was like a life and death symbol because the red lobster is a cooked dead lobster, yet often still simulated to be alive. So this idea of life and death.
That is very interesting. And you've studied philosophy at uni, so has this inspired you in some ways?
Yeah, definitely. For me, philosophy was really the distillation of my artistic thinking. And I think I feel very lucky that I was able to go through a midlife crisis at 18 and really like think about all these crazy things. And basically, yeah, I guess it really helped distill what I had to say, because I think art is also just what you've got to say to the world. And I think for me, it's about channeling an energy of a positive, empowering art for everyone energy, like a satire against seriousness and pretension, and just celebrating the very essence of life and its simplicity.
And you blend this bold pop art with art history as well. So why did you decide on this style in particular?
Yeah, well, I love the spirit of the art that's accessible and not just art that speaks to a very small demographic. I love the spirit of pop and accessibility and pop culture language, the idea that the everyday is filled with so much profound moments, and actually the great poetry of life is from everyday life. So I think for me the language of the everyday is really how to achieve a more profound connection.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your artistic journey? When did you decide on this particular style? Was it from the very beginning, or has this evolved?
Yeah, so I guess my artistic identity evolved. I think that studying philosophy was a very big part of it in terms of my thinking, but I think with making a language, it takes time, and in a way I think of it a bit like sieving for gold in a stream. You sieve a lot of things, but actually certain things get stuck in your sieve, and they mean something to you, and you keep coming back to them, and then they become your like language. Because I think it's very important as an artist to create like an identity in your thinking that's also a visual consistency of identity in your work, so that the viewer can follow your thinking visually, and there's a flow and a narrative, because like all meaning derives from story and narrative. So I think as an artist, it's so important to keep this sort of idea of like a journey and a story to the audience, because it allows for the meaning to land better.
So we are here at the top charity art exhibition, and there are two pieces of yours presented here. Can you tell us a bit more about them?
Yeah, so the two works of mine in the exhibition are my lobster flower sculpture, which is really me, my lobster persona disguised as a flower. And I loved this sculpture in the context of a formal garden in such a beautiful palace, because for me there's a spirit of Alice in Wonderland, of surrealism and fantasy with the sculpture. The idea, first of all, it's already surreal that I've become a cartoon lobster, but the cartoon lobster has then disguised himself as a flower. So it's a further ode of surrealistic absurdity. And so for me, that's the energy of this fantastical power of art to really create the sense of escapism, and also using the symbol of the flower as a symbol of hope and beauty and human fragility, the fragility of life. And I love how the flower really captures this sort of the transient quality of beauty and existence and yeah, the transient nature of life. And so I think it's a very profound, but yet very beautiful and very accessible symbol.
The ephemeral flower lobster.
Yeah, so the large sculpture is made in steel. So I make a small maquette in my studio, then I work with my foundry to make a large scale version of the work. And so it's, it's very complex because obviously there's so many different sections to it. And then as well as the sculpture, I also have a large scale painting, also using the flower symbol. The painting is very specifically references Andy Warhol and his flower paintings. Because people were calling me the godson of Andy Warhol, I thought it was quite funny that I should appropriate then an element of Warhol's work. But so I took an element of the Warhol flowers, which he himself actually took from a magazine on photography, like like an advert for flowers. So he took the sort of image for his flower paintings from an advertisement on flowers, and he then did a silkscreen. And I like the idea that I took his image of the flower silkscreen and turned it into like a three-dimensional product, like a toy. And then I reimagined a whole composition of these flower toys, creating this very like pop, positively sort of squishy image of flowers.
What about your target audiences? Who are they? Are these predominantly young people or perhaps older ones? Do you have an audience in a sense?
Yeah, well, I definitely have an audience. I mean, my career was really established in Asia. So my work is very well known in China and also very much in Korea. So I have like a lot of K-pop stars are fans of my work and collectors of my work, and then also in Japan and Singapore. So I have quite a lot of like large public sculptures in many of these cities. But yeah, so I definitely have quite a young collector base of like artists and musicians and things in Asia, but also business leader types. One of my biggest collectors runs a very important electronics company, in probably one of the biggest ones in Asia. So and yes, I've been very lucky to meet very interesting people that ended up collecting my work. So I feel very lucky that I've had this amazing journey. But I think in terms of the age range, it's actually can be very much any age, but there's generally a spirit of a very youthful spirit. So people that connect with this sort of spirit of childhood, positivity towards art and optimism and satire. And I think that spirit can be in kids, but it also can be in older people. It's very much a philosophy.
Right, and this multi-dimensional meaning of your works. But you do sculptures, but you also do paintings. Do you have your favorite medium?
Yeah, I mean, I started really doing paintings to begin with, and then the sculptures just became a way of bringing the paintings into reality and like blurring the line of art and reality by putting a sculpture into context of an amazing location. Then it brings it into this very much a real setting and it interacts with the world a bit. But yeah, for me, the art drawing is always the way of like taking the idea out of my mind and somehow into the world in a first stage. So I think it's probably the most important process.
So what inspires you to create these particular works about other artists? We've discussed them a little bit, right? But perhaps other things?
Yeah, well, I'm obsessed with art history, the language of art, and this constant human struggle to express oneself, and just to reflect our freedom as individuals to create and make worlds. And I'm very much inspired by world building. The fact that as an artist you can create a mini universe and reinvent the world in a way. So I'm very inspired by artists that have done that in the past, like great artist Nikita Sinfal, who made an amazing sculpture park outside Rome. Keith Haring, also amazing like energy of democracy in his work. Nam June Paik, the South Korean video artist and sculptor and stuff. Alexander Calder, also an artist I love. Primary colors. I guess I love the spirit of empowerment in art and giving energy somehow, using color as like a punk way of creating energy.
What about artworks amassed here at this exhibition? Do you have your favorite one, aside from your own works, of course?
Yeah, my partner Charlotte's work, my favorite.
That's a very good answer. I've heard it's inspired by Emily Dickinson's poem.
Yes, very beautiful.
So, looking into the future, what are your plans? Any major undertakings?
So I've got a big exhibition in Pompeii. I'm doing like a big sculpture takeover of Pompeii archaeological site in June with the Italian Minister of Culture. So that's like a really passion project, like a dream project for me. In addition to that, I've got like a museum show in London in July and then a big show in China in September.
So Philip, one more question. You've mentioned your partner, so I hope it's okay to ask. How is it to work and live with another artist? Is it challenging or perhaps, beneficial for your artistic process?
Yeah, well, I think it's like having two worlds next door to each other. You just have to have good, it's a good lesson for how countries should, treat, when you've got two worlds, are just coexisting peacefully and creating and helping each other and like trying to, to keep creating.
But do you help one another with creating these sculptures?
Yeah, we don't collaborate specifically, but obviously because we both understand the struggles and the challenges, I think we help each other when we can.
And how do you find Warsaw being here? Have you been here before?
It's my first time, so this is my first day in Warsaw. Yeah, it's obviously a city with very amazing history in terms of amazing art. Like one of my favorite musicians is Frédéric Chopin, so I'm very excited to be here.
And is music important to you in terms of, artistically, in a sense?
Of course, I often think when I hear a certain music, I want to create something that, the way that makes me feel, that music, I want to make something visual that represents that. Like when you hear something amazing piece of music, it can be a spirit of, like a declaration of the human spirit, of defiance, great like punk or great piece of groundbreaking music. There's a spirit of, transcendence, defiance of the tragedy of human condition. I think there's something very powerful in that. So like I love that, and I also love when music breaks the rules and creates a new sound. And it's like I want to make art that looks like the way that sounds. So that's a great way of, inspiring the spirit.
And do you have a playlist for when you work?
No, not really, but people in my studio play lots of stuff, so I'm always too disorganized, I'm too caught up in stuff to actually thinking about the playlist, but there's always music in the studio.
So Philip, one last question before we go. What would you like the audiences to take away from your artworks?
Well, I'd like the audience, I guess, to connect with the spirit of an energy that comes hopefully from my work, like a satirical, philosophical yet light-hearted but positive energy that hopefully, when you look at the power of a sunflower, for me I'd like my work to homage the power of a sunflower and demonstrate how human creativity can do that too.
Oh, that is a beautiful message. Philip Colbert, thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for watching Pulse of Culture. Please stay tuned for more here on TVP World.